an event that had dramatic consequences for our city. 80% of Hoboken was underwater. We were without power for several days, and the National Guard had to be called in to our city. There was millions of dollars in damage to Hoboken, our businesses, our homes, our PATH station, and so much more. We'll never forget the consequences of this major event in our history. Thankfully, we know that Hoboken has bounced back because we are a resilient city. But what Superstorm Sandy underscored was the undeniable fact that sea levels are rising, and we must do something about it now because it could determine if cities like Hoboken will even exist in the future. I'm proud that Hoboken, in partnership with Governor Murphy and the state, is ready, willing, and able to do just that. We are taking a multifaceted approach to climate change by making Hoboken more resilient from flooding events that are likely to increase due to climate change. One way we're accomplishing this ambitious task is to build our parks to not only provide open space amenities, but to also withhold and store rainwater to mitigate the impacts of our sewers and to help keep our streets dry. We are standing next to Hoboken's second Resiliency Park, right behind me, here at 7th and Jackson, thanks to a public-private partnership that withholds up to 450,000 gallons of rainwater. Parks like this, they're parks as a defense against flooding. Along with the Northwest Park, which we're building with the strong support of Governor Murphy, will become Hoboken's third resiliency park and New Jersey's largest resiliency park. And these are a part of our comprehensive efforts to combat the effects of climate change. But the major threat to coastal communities like Hoboken that threatens our city's long-term longevity is the threat of rising sea levels. I'm so proud that thanks to the leadership of former Mayor Dawn Zimmer, that Hoboken was awarded $230 million for comprehensive flood protection through Rebuild by Design. Over the past 2 years, as we move forward with this comprehensive flood protection, let me be clear, there has been no better partner than Governor Murphy and his staff at the Department of Environmental Protection to help Hoboken move forward with this ambitious project. Governor Murphy and his staff have not just been supportive of this project, they've been on the ground, attending meetings, actively engaged at the micro level in a way that shows Governor Murphy's true commitment to our climate efforts. Governor Murphy understands how important it is to protect coastal communities from the effects of climate change because he knows that it's real and it's not fake news. With leaders in the White House actively working to ignore science and the threat of rising sea levels, it's critical to have a partner at the state level like Governor Murphy who prioritizes this issue. I'm proud to call him our leader, and I'm so pleased that he's here with us today to take another bold step to make our state more resilient in the long term. Thank you, Governor Murphy.
Thank you, Nick. That was really generous of you. Thank you. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Very good to be here in Hoboken. It is my pleasure to be here with Mayor Ravi Bala, the Commissioner of the Department of Environmental Protection, Katherine Mccabe, New Jersey's Chief Resilience Officer, Dave Rosenblatt, and Assemblyman Raj Mukherjee. We've also got some distinguished elected officials. Thank you for being with us today. And I also want to give a shout out to Dan Kelly, who works directly for me, focused on rebuilding and resiliency in our offices. He's been on the Sandy beat for not all seven, but about 6 of the years. And I want to thank Dan for his support. And thank you, Mayor Bala, again, for your very generous introduction, your warm welcome to the Mile Square City, and for the work that we do so often together with you. So thank you for having us. Oh, the Russians. 7 years ago, Superstorm Sandy rolled upon New Jersey. I don't believe that any of us need to be reminded of the destruction it wreaked across our state, up and down our shore. Ever since then, we've been in a near continual state of rebuilding and restoration. And to be sure, I'm extraordinarily proud of our administration's work to remove the last roadblocks that have prevented too many families from being able to get back into their homes. And let me just say unequivocally, we're not whole yet. While the trajectory of the number of families in the state's program has decreased dramatically in our 21 months in office, and specifically the day we came in, 1,532 families were in our program. A year ago today, that was down to 1,031. As of today, it's now 762, so that's a reduction of about 770 families. While that's great progress, it is not at zero yet. And when or if it will get to zero, I don't know, but we will do everything in our power to do everything we can to get it there. There's been too much pain and suffering that's been overwhelming for too many. Sandy was first referred to as an anomalous event, the result of certain weather patterns converging in just a certain way and at just the wrong time. But even though we know we'll never have another Sandy, the name, by the way, after all, was retired from ever being given to another storm, thank God, it would be naive of us to think that we won't ever see one of Sandy's siblings in New Jersey. The simple fact is that global climate change, especially the warming oceans that feed hurricanes, are making it all the more likely that Sandy wasn't a 100-year event or even a once-in-a-lifetime event. Over the past several hurricane seasons, we've seen the power of larger, slower-moving storms. In fact, some of the latest climate research tells us that we may see what should have been a 100-year storm, not every 100 years, but every 30 years, and that we may see a sea level rise as much as 2 feet by the middle of this century. The truth is that climate change is not coming. It is already here. As we stand here today, we are losing acres of wetlands along our Delaware Bay shore due to rising tides and subsiding land. We cannot stop the seas from rising, and we cannot stop the next big storm from coming, not even with a nuclear weapon. We cannot resign ourselves to the idea that we should just wait it out to the next storm and then expect billions of dollars in insurance claims and federal assistance to allow us to rebuild. We need to be smarter. We need to ensure that our communities and infrastructure are more resilient. And so on the 7th anniversary of Superstorm Sandy, our focus is absolutely on getting more and more families back fully on their feet, but our focus is also about our future. And that's what brings us to Hoboken. Many think of Sandy as just a shore event. Indeed, swaths of our shore were devastated. But if we were to be standing on this street outside here, Ravi, 7 years ago, we would all be chest deep in flood water and Lord knows what else from an overloaded sewer system. Parts of the city were several feet underwater due to the record storm surge, with thousands of residents literally cut off and marooned in neighborhoods that became islands. 2 fire stations had to be evacuated, and the National Guard was called in. In some places, it took a week for the water to subside. In the years since, Hoboken has undertaken a comprehensive and forward-leaning set of initiatives to steel itself against the next storm, as Ravi indicated, and I also want to give Don Zimmer, your distinguished predecessor, a shout out. The Rebuild by Design initiative will make Hoboken a model, not just for urban storm resilience, but a working laboratory in the fight against climate change. But Hoboken is just 1 square mile. New Jersey is 8,700 more, so we must do more. And today I am proud to announce that we will. Today we are taking bold action to facilitate the hard work of adaptation. New Jersey is ground zero for the negative impacts of climate change. And New Jersey cannot be content with anything less than being a national, if not global, leader in resilience and pushing back against the reality of climate change. I am proud in a few minutes to sign an executive order formally establishing the Climate and Flood Resilience Program at DEP. It will be led by our Chief Resilience Officer, right behind me, Dave Rosenblatt. Dave is a career public servant who, as an assistant commissioner, has dedicated himself to the department for decades. And Dave is no stranger to planning for and responding to the impacts of climate change. In the aftermath of Sandy, his team of engineers played a critical role in beach replenishment all along our shore and still do today. And meanwhile, Dave's team is engineering projects like Rebuild by Design here in Hoboken. Dave's first order of business will be to oversee over the next 180 days the development of a comprehensive and scientific report on the potential and anticipated impacts of climate change on our state over at least the next 30 years. Importantly, this report will not be a one-off. Under this order that I will sign, it will be updated at least every 2 years to reflect the latest available climate science. As you may remember, one of Governor Christie's first actions when he took office in 2010 was to abolish the Office of Climate Change. With this executive order, New Jersey will once again be guided by facts and science, not politics and not opinion. In addition, we are creating an Interagency Council on Climate Resilience that will bring together various state departments and agencies to develop both short-term and long-term action plans regarding the impact of climate change on our communities, on our economy, our infrastructure, and our natural resources. Each of these actions will inform the creation of a statewide climate change resilience strategy to be finalized by September 1st, 2020. This comprehensive plan will identify methods that can be used to strengthen statewide resilience efforts, including reducing the risks of wildfires in state forests and parks, and provide guidance for implementing those measures. Secondly, it will include a specific coastal resilience plan. It will promote long-term water and energy resource security. It will seek to reduce the risks to public health due to anticipated climate change, such as increased vulnerability to more extreme temperatures. And finally, but certainly not least, this order requires the State Planning Commission to incorporate climate change considerations as mandatory requirements for the approval and endorsement of long-term development plans submitted by municipalities. Fighting climate change and making New Jersey stronger in the face of more frequent and damaging storms takes all of us. Indeed, this really does take a village. Until now, communities like Hoboken have been left to do much of their post-Sandy resilience planning on their own, without much state assistance. And again, I must make a point of personal privilege here. I must give a special thanks to Rutgers University for all the work they have done and the assistance they have provided to fill that void. But today that all changes. It took all of us pulling together to put our New Jersey back together after Sandy, and that's still a work in progress. And now we'll all work together to make sure we leave our children a stronger and more resilient state. Of course, it's not just Sandy-type storms that drive our concern. It's stronger thunderstorms regularly flooding communities. It's ice storms taking down power lines. It's the rising tides that threaten our coast and inundate neighborhoods. All of this loops back to the need to take a serious and for comprehensive planning based off that science. The work of protecting our communities starts with all of us, and it has to start now. It is my honor to bring up for a few words a great leader in this fight, the Commissioner of the Department of Environmental Protection, Katherine Mccabe.
Thank you, Governor Murphy, and thank you all for being here to share this moment with us. I appreciate the Governor's leadership and support in making climate change a top priority of this administration. And I also want to thank our legislative and municipal partners for their support. Responding to climate change is the single biggest environmental challenge that we face in our state, in our country, and globally. Here today in Hoboken is an example not only of the risks of flooding and climate change, but also of the path forward. 7 years ago, during Superstorm Sandy, the border between Hoboken and Weehawken and the southern end of Hoboken adjacent to Jersey City acted as funnels for flooding. Storm surge rushed through these two areas and joined to cause flooding from the inland side of Hoboken, effectively creating a temporary island, which I'm sure many of you remember. Although Sandy served as a harsh lesson for Hoboken, the city is now an example of the path forward for New Jersey and, I believe, for our country. The Rebuild by Design project in Hoboken is an example of the ingenuity and dedication that we can show as we work to protect our residents from flooding as sea level rises and storms intensify. As a coastal state, New Jersey is particularly vulnerable to sea level rise and flooding, and the impacts of climate change are already touching our lives in many ways, presenting real threats not only to our environment and public health, but also to our economy and our very way of life. As the head of an agency driven by science, I am constantly reading state, national, and international scientists' reports to learn more about climate change. New Jersey, I am happy to report, is very fortunate in having some of the very best climate scientists in the world at institutions like Rutgers and Stevens, who are working on New Jersey-specific climate research. This is an enormous asset to all of us to help us understand how climate change is impacting us and how it will impact us in the years to come. What we do, based on the science, now and in the next few years, will have a lasting impact on our children and on future generations. Under Governor Murphy's leadership, we've already taken several actions to help fight climate change by reducing New Jersey's share of the emissions of greenhouse gases to the global atmosphere. And that includes, as you all probably know, rejoining the Northeast Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, RGGI, to reduce carbon dioxide emissions from the power sector, starting up an offshore wind industry to help achieve the governor's clean energy goals while bringing new jobs to New Jersey, and investing in electric vehicles to reduce emissions from the transportation sector, which is the single biggest contributor to our emissions now. As of July, we have about 27,000 electric vehicles registered in New Jersey, an increase of nearly 10,000 from this time last year. Impressive gain, but we've got a long way to go to achieve our goal of 330,000 electric vehicles by 2025. Importantly, we now have more than 900 public charging outlets at more than 300 locations statewide, and we're working on bringing in more. DEP has also been taking action to build up our community's resilience in the face of climate change. The work we've already done includes working with the Corps of Engineers to construct numerous beach restoration and shore protection projects. Again, many of you are probably familiar with those. We've also developed a coastal vulnerability index that enables our 239 coastal communities to understand and plan for their risks from sea level rise and storms. We've provided grants and technical supports for communities working together to reduce impacts of flooding through the Resilient New Jersey and New Jersey Frames programs. And we've been using our Blue Acres buyout program to assist New Jersey families whose homes have repeatedly flooded and who need our help to relocate. DEP already has a head start on the Coastal Resilience Plan, and we will be starting in the next few months to issue a sea level rise draft report, which you'll all be able to see, which will begin to inform our scientific discussion of what we need to plan for. And now, with the direction of the governor's new executive order, we will join with our sister agencies to work together to develop a statewide climate resilience strategy. This will plan for climate change in all parts of the state, including inland as well as coastal areas. We know that climate change is already bringing us increasingly intense storms and flooding in very many parts of the states. And we also believe that increased rainfall and the heat that we saw this summer contributed to the harmful algal blooms, a startling increase in those this summer, that we saw in so many of our lakes, which were devastating for vacationers and also for the local economies of those lake communities. Clearly, climate change is already impacting our lives in so many ways, and we must accelerate our efforts to rise to the challenge now. Once again, I want to thank Governor Murphy for his leadership in giving not only DEP, but all state agencies the charge and direction today to move forward, to prepare the state and our many communities to become more resilient as we prepare for the future our children and our grandchildren will inherit. Thank you.
That's the emphasis on grandchildren. Thank you, Katherine. I'm standing up here reflecting on first conversations. I remember distinctly when I met Don Zimmer talking about Sandy, talking about what the Dutch had done, a country that's below sea level in many places, and how Hoboken could get out ahead of that. In our very first conversation, Ravi, that was the case. Katherine and I, obviously, given her portfolio stick, I remember being in your bar, and the first bar I've ever been in, by the way, but I talking about it. A lot of labor conversations. Barry Kushner, who sits atop the Central Labor Council here in Hudson County, lots of deep labor conversations. Getting this right sort of is in our midst in so many different ways. So the steps we're taking today can take a lot of different initiatives, I think, and codify them and put them in a sharp relief, which I think is one of the big benefits. Again, I've already referred to Dave Rosenblatt. He's been an outstanding public servant for the state for decades, and it's my honor to bring him up here. He's the Chief Resilience Officer located in the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection. Please help me welcome Dave Rosenblatt.
Thank you, Governor Murphy, Commissioner Mccabe. So, working with Mayor Bala and former Mayor Zimmer during the Rebuild by Design process has confirmed for me two things that will guide the development of the climate change strategy and the Coastal Resilience Plan. One, there is no substitute for persistence, single-mindedness at times, if you want to reach your goals. Science is telling us that parts of New Jersey will look and feel different over the coming decades as temperature and sea level rise increase. So we must set goals for our state. What are our expectations as coastal waters permanently cover some of our beaches and marshes? What will we demand in the heat of a hotter city summer? Science will point us to the direction, but we will have to make decisions if we are to adapt to the coming changes. And then we have to move forward relentlessly with actions. Two, nothing will get done without a well-informed and very involved public, like we've had here in Hoboken for the Rebuild by Design project. The public process for setting goals and actions is not always fast and neat, but always necessary. We look forward to taking this model of participation to every community as we pursue climate resilience for this state. Thank you, and thank you, Hoboken, for all the lessons. Thanks.
Dave, thank you for everything you have done and will do for this state. I mentioned it takes a village, and that includes great legislative leaders. Let me just remind everybody, I know which party I have the honor of leading. I know which side of the aisle I'm on, but my public service announcement is there are elections a week from today. Please, everybody, vote. It's far more important than you vote than who you vote for, but please get out and vote. This is typically a low turnout election, and it's one that too many people take off. And my plea is to everybody listening in this state to please get out there and exercise your sacred democratic right. Having said that, I will now show my complete affection, support, and passion for an extraordinary legislator, a guy who comes in every single day with one goal only, and that is to do the right thing for the people he represents. We just had an extraordinary experience in India together, getting a lot of investment and jobs to come back to New Jersey, and by the way, a lot of clean energy elements of our agenda there. I can't say enough good things about him. Please help me welcome Assemblyman Raj Mukherjee.
Thank you, Governor. Thank you all for being here. I remember during Superstorm Sandy, I was deputy mayor of Jersey City. And with no lights at City Hall, we were camped out at OEM trying to figure out the simple things, among other challenges, like how to disseminate information to the community. No power, no phone service, no cell service, no TV, no internet, and therefore no social media. How do you get the word out? So we had to get creative. I remember riding around on a fire truck, blasting updates on a megaphone in different neighborhoods. We had to implement curfews. We had people using portable heaters and plugging in electric stoves to generators, and there were electrical fires, heating their homes by leaving the stove on, carbon monoxide risks. Gas stations ran out of gas, lines of cars. And I remember visiting the low-lying areas of Jersey City that were hit the worst, and here in Hoboken, the whole city's low-lying. So my then girlfriend, now wife, Natasha, was living here in Hoboken at the time, and she was displaced from her home at Park and First, where they had 8-foot-high watermarks, and where we eventually found her refrigerator in the neighbor's backyard. And as the governor said, if there were parts of the city where he would have been in chest-high water, if he was chest-high, I would have been fully under. But that's what we were dealing with at the time. You know, in the Billy Joel song, Miami 2017, does everyone know that song? Yeah. Seen the lights go out on Broadway, I saw the Empire State laid low, and life went on beyond the Palisades. He was talking about a post-apocalyptic New York City. And I lived in the Jersey City Heights during Sandy, right up on the cliff on Ogden Ave. And my view was the Manhattan skyline, all the rooftops in Hoboken. And it felt like you were in the song, because during the day, yellow cabs were floating, and at night, all we saw was like this swath of darkness for several nights, and it was eerie. But it wasn't all bad, because the people of Hoboken, the people of Jersey City and of this great state, were resilient and stronger than the storm. Hudson County hosts several of the densest cities in America, and I think that just makes our communities closer knit, because we checked in on our elderly neighbors. We shared essentials. We really didn't have rioting or looting like folks were worried about, and we came together. But we still haven't recovered from that worst disaster in state history, and coastal and inland flooding continue to threaten our state. So I was thinking about the importance of Executive Order 89 as I was coming here. I was thinking about the fact that my son Leo turned 6 months old this week, and at least one report has suggested, but for Rebuild by Design and the flood mitigation and control measures that Mayor Bala's administration and Mayor Zimmer before him has and will continue to implement, half of Hoboken could be underwater by the time he's my age. And most of Hoboken would have been underwater in 80 years at the dawn of the 22nd century when he would still be alive. And that's scary. And it's why EO 89 is so critical, and I'm grateful for the governor for signing it here today. A little 89 trivia for any college football fans. Does anyone know who the consensus national champion and the Sugar Bowl champions were in 1989? Any guess as to which team? The Miami Hurricanes. Yeah, it's a little premonition. The very second bill the governor signed into law after being sworn into office last January, after restoring family planning funding, was one I had the privilege of authoring, A1903. After the Trump administration took us out of the Paris Climate Accord, states stepped up. States stepped up to form the United States Climate Alliance and uphold our democracy's commitment to address the threats posed by climate change and prevent the devastation from more Irenes and Sandys. His predecessor had vetoed it, but Governor Murphy signed it swiftly. And today with the O89, he is reaffirming our state's commitment to all those who recovered from Sandy, to those who are still recovering from Sandy, because science is a thing. It's an actual thing. And global warming and the threats posed by it are so frightening, and generation after generation will be paying for it if we don't take the kind of substantive and decisive action we're taking today by the governor's signing of Executive Order 89. So thank you, Governor, for being a champion, for doing the right thing for our community, for here in Hudson County, and for our planet. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Two things very briefly. We'll take a couple of questions before we sign the executive order. Number one, we're the densest state in the nation, and Hudson County is the densest county in the densest state in the nation. So getting this right, we're all on top of each other. We're all in this together. We got to get it right. It's pass-fail. Secondly, I was at the New Jersey Hall of Fame inductions on Sunday night. I saw John Bon Jovi and Southside Johnny sing, and Raj, I could have seen you up there. I didn't expect would get that glimpse in your singing capabilities this morning. So that was an extra added treat. Thank you for everything you do. We'll take a couple of quick questions if we got them. We'll take either.
Let's stay on top.
Yep.
Your executive order put Dave Rosenblatt in charge of a new unit.
Essentially taking, it's both codifying and putting in stark relief some of the things we're doing already, and we're all big believers that doing that furthers your objectives, but it's also establishing things that are new. So, for instance, it's an Interagency Council on Resiliency, which will call on a whole broad range of government departments and agencies. It's making sure that in our state planning process that resiliency is a codified, important element to that. It's requiring that every couple of years we refresh our game plan based on the evolution of climate science. So there's a little bit of old and a significant amount of new stuff. Please.
You urge people to vote in an election a week from today.
Yes.
To what extent do you think the election involves you and is a referendum on your first 2 years in office?
You know, it depends.
GOP calls it the Murphy midterm.
Well, I think they may who calls it that, the GOP? Yeah, I think they may live to see that come to life at their expense. I think it's any race is a combination of a whole lot of things. I'm incredibly proud of what we've done and continue to do for that stronger and fairer New Jersey that works for everybody, not just for some. Putting working families ahead of special interests. And special interests have been at the trough we've seen quite vividly for a long time. It's about time, way past time, that working families and the middle class were put back on the pedestal. So if I'm in there fighting for the middle class and the dreams of those as I was growing up, looking up, hoping someday to get into the middle class, if that's what they associate with me, I'll take that any day of the week. And I'm proud of what we're doing. We're up and down the state campaigning over the next week. Our schedule is still coming together, but we're in a very interesting mix of districts, including ones that have historically gone where Raj is, have historically gone our way, but we can't take anything for granted. It's a low turnout election, so if you're an incumbent, you got to make sure you scrap for every vote, as I know he does and will do. But it's also a mix of places that we are not necessarily used to playing home games. So I'm proud of our record. I'm proud to be standing for what we believe in particular for the middle class in this state. We'll see how the chips fall. Please.
Governor, 762 Sandy families still out.
Yes.
Couple things. Why are they still out? What will it take to get them back? And how long will it take?
So it's a variety of reasons. There's no one reason. And Dan, you may want to come up and join me, and Dan can give you a little bit more detail. How long will they be out? I can't marry myself to the answer to that. Obviously, our goal is to get that number to 0. But that takes a lot of different parties doing their share and their part, including the individual homeowners. So we can control a significant amount of the factors that would contribute to that number, but we can't control all of it. But we are committed as fast and as best we can to get that number to zero or as close to zero as possible. What are the big bucket reasons, Dan, that folks are still out?
Sure, and I think one of the things Governor Murphy has approved that we've done now recently over the last year is the supplemental funding that gives homeowners who are short on cash, don't have enough to finish their projects, all of the financial need that they have. So it removes any financial roadblock. That money is getting on the streets now. We've had several homeowners receive in excess of $140,000. Without that program in place, those homeowners don't have the funds there. So we have it for anyone who's financially short, we're going to make them whole. And for everyone else who's continuing to rebuild, who's paying a mortgage and having to pay rent while they're out of their homes, we have our rental assistance program. So homeowners aren't getting double dipped where they have to pay a rent and a mortgage. Through those programs, we're trying to provide homeowners at least all the financial assistance that we have, and through our DCA Sandy Recovery Division, giving them the wherewithal and guidance to get past rebuilding roadblocks in their program, in their actual projects.
Well done.
I think
Typically financial.
Yeah.
And we've now put more money on the street. Dan and I were discussing this morning, we can't predict what the number looks like a year from today. Obviously, we've come down by 50% since we took office. You'd like to see that number, that trajectory continue. There's more money on the street. That probably contributes to a more robust building season next spring and summer. But I don't think we can marry ourselves to a particular number. Dan also made an important point. Folks can't suffer double jeopardy here. They can't both be lugging a mortgage and then paying rent on top of that. So that assistance program will continue, and that will allow folks, hopefully, the more latitude to financially allow them to rebuild. Please. I don't think a whole lot on impeachment, other than, as I said before, that I'm completely with the Speaker. I think she's absolutely doing the right thing. And that includes a deliberate process that's fact-based, that's transparent, that is one foot in front of the other, that makes as compelling a case as possible. I think she's doing exactly the right thing. And I think it's quite obvious. I say this as much as a former United States ambassador who was in the midst of a lot of foreign relations conversations. The ones that are being talked about and reported on are unlike any that have taken place, I think, maybe in our country's history, but certainly in any history that I know of. Please.
Yeah, we actually now have a total of 3 resiliency parks. The first one was in the southwest part of Hoboken, the Southwest Park. The second one with the partnership of Larry Bijou and Bijou Properties, the public-private partnership we spoke about, is right here to your north at 7th and Jackson. And the third, which we broke ground on with the help of the DEP, is the Northwest Resiliency Park, which we expect to be open by mid-2022. The Northwest Resiliency Park will hold, when built, about 1 million gallons of water through an underground detention tank. I would ask Director Gonzalez. Yeah, I'd say when we combine the 3 resiliency parks, you're talking about storing about 2.5 million gallons of water. The Southwest Resiliency Park. What is that?
Where is it?
Oh, where is it? It's on Patterson, near Jackson. Yeah, Jackson, Patterson. Yep.
Thank you.
Okay.
Hold on 1 second. We come back over here. I'll come back to you. That he's what about President Trump? Listen, Bob is all I can say about this. Bob is a decorated veteran who paid an enormous price for protecting the freedoms of our country, an extraordinary, heroic figure in our state, and I wish him nothing but the very best. Please.
Vote by mail balloting has already seen that 1/3 of people are registered to vote by mail come in, and it's the majority of Democrats are voting vote by mail. Do you have any thoughts on that whole process and how Democrats are benefiting?
How Democrats are what, sorry? Well, it's not intended to benefit only Democrats. The fact of the matter is that if Democrats are participating at a higher rate, that probably tells you something about a number of things. I hope it's back to the original question that Michael asked. I hope that it says something about how they feel about the general party's health and what we stand for in this state, in the stronger and fairer New Jersey that we talk about. It probably has, someone wrote this recently, you probably have a heavy dose of President Trump in there, would be my guess. You saw a significant amount of that in the elections last fall. Admittedly, those were congressional in the U.S. Senate race, but my guess is that that's also a factor. And I think we've got really good candidates, both great incumbents like Raj, but also some great challengers up and down the state. Please. You know, we definitely support banning menthol as a flavor among the flavored vape steps that we want to see taken in working with the legislature. I don't think we've hung our hat yet on menthol cigarettes, but I think it's something we have to seriously consider.
My second question is, with the new developments on the Williams pipeline, the company revoking 3 of the key permits, what are your thoughts on the pipeline now? Have they changed?
It really hasn't. I mean, Katherine and her team have done an extraordinary job. We say this all the time. We call balls and strikes. They chose to pull back their permit applications on Friday. Should they come back in the future, we'll treat them the same way we've treated them up until now. We try to have as level a playing field as possible. Again, call balls and strikes, and to be as deliberate and fact-based as possible, because once decisions get made, we don't want. We want those decisions to be sound and withstand legal challenges, et cetera, going forward. So we'll continue to deal with them the same way we have. Sorry, Meg, and then we'll go back to Nikita.
Can you voice any ideas that the DEP or the Resilience Commission has for going forward for better protecting New Jersey? I know we stated what we've done.
Yeah. I'll say a couple of words, and then if Dave or Katherine want to come in here, I think it's fairly straightforward. It's to do smart projects like Rebuild by Design, which is, as one of our colleagues reminded me this morning, some places do projects like this that cover a piece of a community. This is intended for the entirety, to protect the entirety of Hoboken. So it's to continue to do smart projects like that. It's continue to make decisions based on the facts and science that informs our entire planning process. And God forbid we would do that. And so I think it's a collection of not just preparing for and planning for the future, but doing smart projects along the way and making smart steps. Katherine mentioned we rejoined the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative collection of states. We signed up to the Paris Climate Accords. We've got a massive offshore wind, not just aspiration, it's actually in process. We want to be one of the leaders in solar, in particular community solar. So it informs the whole set of actions that we take. Is that fair, everybody? We'll do one more. Actually, we'll do 2 more here, 1 and 2.
I've asked you to version support list now that we're a week out. Where are you campaigning for Assembly Democrats? Where are you planning to campaign over the next week?
Yeah, so I basically bounce around the state every day. I'm with Ralph Caputo tonight. We've got for my personal GOTV plan that we're putting the final touches on. It'll be around the state. It'll be in different geographies, and it'll be in different districts, meaning standing with somebody like Ralph, who's an incumbent in something that has historically, at least of late, been a reliably, more reliably than not, blue seat and blue district, but also standing with some of our challengers in some districts that have not necessarily been home games for us. So I think you can probably expect to see me somewhere in and around the 20s over the course of the next week. And I'm really excited and looking forward to it. Please. What's that? To be determined. Please. Does it bother me? It ought to bother all of us. Like many things that he stands for, it's impairing the future of our children and grandchildren. I mentioned this earlier. I think we all are in unanimous agreement, based on any amount of science and fact, climate change isn't a potential reality, it's here, and it's having hugely damaging consequences. And look at the results of Superstorm Sandy that we are commemorating the 7th anniversary of in this community alone, never mind in hundreds of communities in this state. Real devastating consequences. Families that have gone through suffering and pain and are still not back on their feet, never mind the longer term consequences. So yes, to not be on the right side of climate change and not be proactive is hugely damaging to our country and unfortunately as well to our state. I want to thank Mayor Bala. Thank you so much, Ravi, for having us and hosting us so graciously. Commissioner Mccabe, our Chief Resiliency Officer, Dave Rosenblatt. Raj, it's an honor to always stand with you, Dan, and the whole team in your operation. Thank you all so much. We're going to go sign this executive order right now. Again, as Raj said, executive order number 89. Do the money shot without my eyeglasses. Okay, here goes. Now I need my glasses to make sure. Let's sign like someone else's name. First pen goes to Mayor Ravi Bala, the great city of Hoboken. Congratulations. Thanks for having us. Commissioner Katherine Mccabe. Well done. Chief Resilience Officer Dave Rosenblatt. Dave, thank you and congratulations for everything you do. And last but certainly not least, Assemblyman Raj Mukherjee. Bless you. Thank you, everything. Executive Order 89 is now in operation. Come on in, guys. Don't lose that. Thanks, everybody.